The courtroom falls silent as the judge enters, his presence commanding respect. But not for her. Tiffany Kensington, a spoiled socialite dripping in designer labels, barely glances up from her phone. She sighs, rolls her eyes, and lounges back in her seat like she's at a fashion show, not facing serious charges. Judge Harris, a seasoned and no-nonsense man, watches her with a calm but knowing gaze. He's seen all kinds in his courtroom, but this one might just take the cake. As he begins to speak, Tiffany interrupts, smirking, dismissive, convinced her family's wealth will get her off the hook. Gasps ripple through the room. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Did she really just say that? But Judge Harris doesn't flinch. Instead, he leans forward, delivering a sentence so unexpected, so perfectly fitting, that the entire courtroom is left in stunned silence. And Tiffany, she's not smirking anymore. Tiffany's confident smirk fades as murmurs fill the courtroom. She glances at her lawyer, expecting reassurance, but even he looks uneasy. Judge Harris remains calm, his expression unreadable. The air in the room feels heavier now, every pair of eyes locked onto her. Tiffany isn't used to this. She's used to control, to getting her way with a single phone call. Her father, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, has always bailed her out. But as she looks at Judge Harris, something in his stare tells her this time is different. The prosecutor clears her throat, flipping through pages. "Miss Kensington, do you understand the charges against you?" Tiffany groans, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Obviously," she mutters. A sharp silence follows. Judge Harris folds his hands. "Then you also understand," he says evenly, "that privilege doesn't place you above the law." Tiffany stiffens. For the first time, doubt flickers in her eyes. Tiffany shifts in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable. She's never had to face real consequences before, and the weight of the judge's words lingers in the air. Her father always made problems disappear, but right now, there's no reassuring phone call, no expensive lawyer whispering guarantees in her ear. Judge Harris isn't playing by the rules she's used to. Across the room, the prosecutor watches her carefully, as if waiting for the moment Tiffany realizes she's out of her depth. The evidence against her is strong, but it's her attitude that's making things worse. Even her lawyer looks frustrated now, his fingers tapping against the table. Judge Harris leans back, studying her. "Tell me, Miss Kensington, do you believe the law applies to everyone equally?" Tiffany scoffs. "I believe money talks." Gasps ripple through the courtroom again. Judge Harris doesn't react. His face remains unreadable. But the slight pause before he speaks next makes Tiffany's stomach drop. The courtroom is dead silent. Even the scribbling of the court reporter has stopped. Tiffany feels a sudden tightness in her throat, but she lifts her chin, masking it with defiance. Judge Harris rests his hands on the bench, his gaze never leaving her. "You believe money talks," he repeats, his voice calm but sharp. "And what exactly is it saying for you right now, Miss Kensington?" Tiffany doesn't answer. For the first time, she feels something unfamiliar, doubt. Her father's absence feels heavier now. She expected a slap on the wrist, maybe a fine, but this is different. Judge Harris exhales, shaking his head. "Privilege without accountability is dangerous," he says, "and it seems you've never faced the weight of your actions." The tension is suffocating. Tiffany shifts again, crossing her arms. "So what? You're gonna make an example out of me?" she snaps, her voice cracking slightly. Judge Harris finally leans forward. "No, Miss Kensington," he says, his tone steady. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." The courtroom watches, breathless. Tiffany swallows hard. For the first time, she realizes she might not be able to buy her way out of this one. Tiffany's heart pounds, but she refuses to let it show. She's been in tough situations before, ones where charm, connections, or a well-placed phone call smoothed everything over. But this time, none of that seems to matter. Judge Harris isn't budging. The door closed with a soft thud, and the bus lurched forward. The woman shot Maya one last look, as if daring her to do something. And for the first time, Maya felt the power shift, at least, that's what she thought. Just as Maya felt a flicker of victory in her stance, the bus jerked to a sudden stop. The force caught everyone off guard, and for a split second, the atmosphere shifted from tense silence to mild chaos. People lurched forward, some catching themselves against the seats, others stumbling. Maya instinctively reached out to steady herself, her hand grazing the back of the woman's seat. But then, out of nowhere, the woman snapped. "Watch where you're touching," she hissed, spinning around with a scowl. The unexpected outburst caught everyone by surprise. Maya's heart skipped a beat, her breath caught in her chest. It was as though the woman had been waiting for an excuse to escalate things. Her face twisted with anger, as if she'd been pushed too far by something Maya had no control over. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a voice from the back of the bus rang out sharply. "Hey, maybe you should stop being rude." A man, mid-30s with a calm but firm tone, stood up and addressed the woman directly. The woman turned sharply toward him, her lips curled in annoyance. "Mind your business," she snapped, clearly irked by the confrontation. But the man stood firm, his eyes locked on hers. The tension in the bus was escalating again, but this time the spotlight wasn't just on Maya. It was on the woman who had, unknowingly, stirred a small rebellion. Maya watched, stunned, as the whole dynamic shifted. She had been waiting for a sign, something to tip the scales, to show her that it wasn't just her battle. She didn't know why this man had stepped in, but she could feel the collective unease spreading through the bus. People were watching now, waiting for the next move. The stakes had just been raised, and Maya had no idea how it was going to play out. But one thing was certain, the woman's world was about to get a lot smaller. The man's words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, the bus was silent. The woman shot him a glare, her lips trembling with barely contained fury. "You don't know me, don't talk to me like that," she growled, but the man's calm, unshaken stance only seemed to fuel the fire. Maya stood, watching the exchange unfold, her heartbeat racing in her ears. She could feel the eyes of everyone on the bus now, all of them waiting for the next move. The woman, who had once seemed so sure of herself, was now visibly rattled, her grip on her purse tightening as if it were a shield. "I've had enough of this," Maya thought to herself, as the anger and frustration that had been building all this time finally bubbled to the surface. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, and then another, her gaze never leaving the woman. The passengers were murmuring now, whispers swirling around the bus. Maya reached the seat. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She simply sat down, forcing the woman to confront the fact that she could no longer control the space. The bus was still moving, but the power dynamic had shifted. Maya exhaled deeply, a sense of relief washing over her as she settled into the seat, the weight of the moment finally lifting. But just when it seemed like the situation was about to settle, the unexpected happened. The woman stood up abruptly, her eyes wild with anger. "You think you've won? You don't know what's coming for you," she spat, and before anyone could react, she turned toward the driver. In a moment of shocking audacity, the woman started yelling at the driver, demanding that Maya be removed from the bus. The entire bus seemed to freeze in disbelief as passengers turned their attention to the altercation. But the driver, instead of complying, simply shook his head, his voice calm but firm. "No one's getting removed. You're free to leave if you don't like it." The woman's face drained of color as the weight of the driver's words hit her. The reality of the situation sank in. She stood there, humiliated and defeated, as the other passengers watched in quiet judgment.